Good day, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's geography lesson. My name is Nomthandazo Malembe. This lesson is brought to you by the Northern Cape Department of Education in collaboration with Phakama Research and Development. Today we're going to do revision under question paper 2, question 3. So your question 3, that is your map work questions. But before we start with our revision, I just want us to go through our lesson objective for this lesson. By the end of this lesson, learners, you should be able to identify the structure of paper 2 as well as question 3 on the following topic, which is map work. Then we're going to go through the topics as well as the structure of the question paper. So your question paper is allocated with 150 marks. In that 150 marks, you will have your section A as well as your section B. The duration of your paper is 3 hours. So in that section A, you will have 2 questions. The first one is your rural as well as your urban settlement with 60 marks. The second question, question 2, which is your economic geography. Then you move to section B. Your section B, you will have your question 3, which is your map work questions. Then to further break down the questions, your question 1, you will have your rural urban as well as the urban settlement. So the questions will come as in figures, your figure 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, as well as figure 1.5. You will have your short objective questions in figure 1.1 as well as figure 1.2. So these short objective questions, they may come as a multiple choice question or whereby you need to choose inside the bracket the correct answer, or you are given the column A as well as your column B. So remember, in your column A and column B, again, you are given 2 options. It either you choose X or you choose Z, or maybe they do Y as well as Z. And then once you are done with your short objective questions, you then move to the next figure, which is your 1.3, your 1.4, as well as your 1.5. In these 3 figures, it's where you're going to get your short, medium, as well as your long questions. When we're talking about the medium questions, you should expect your 2 times 2 questions. Then your medium, your high questions, which is your long question, you should expect your 3 times 2, as well as your paragraph question, whereby you need to give 4 responses. Amongst those 3 questions, you will have 1 question that will be a paragraph question. So the rest will be your 3 times 2 as well as your 2 times 2 question. That's your question 1. Then after, you move to your question 2. Under your question 2, it's your economic geography. Again, the setup is the same. It will be 2.1, 2.2, up to 2.5. Your 2.1 as well as your 2.2, it's where you're going to get your short objective questions, your one-word answers. And then after that, you will have your 2.3, 2.4 as well as 2.5. It's where you should expect your 2 times 2 question, your 3 times 2. And then amongst those 3 questions, you're going to have 1 with a paragraph question. And then after that, you move to section B, which is your question 3. So our focus today, we are focusing on question 3. Under question 3, your map work, which is 30 marks, then the further breakdown of your 30 marks, your map skills as well as your calculation, they will give you 10 marks. And then after that, your map interpretation, they will give you 12 marks, and your GIS, it's 8 marks. So remember, when it comes to your calculations, you will never know which calculation it will be asked. So therefore, it is best that you practice all the calculations so that you don't come across the problems when you are inside the exam center. And then after that, your map interpretation, again, you're going to interpret what we have learned in the theory and what we are seeing in the map. And then after that, your GIS, again, you will never know which concept they will ask. So it is best that you read all the GIS concepts so that you can be able to define them and you can be able to apply them. Then we're looking at the examination tips now. So these are the tips during your question paper. You have received the question paper and then you have read the instructions as well as the information that you are given on page 2. So remember, those are the general information for the whole paper. So now these ones are strictly for your question 3, which we are focusing on today. We said question 3 is where you're going to get your map work questions. So you start by reading the general information. You will be given a general information for you to get used of the area that is being questioned. So you will get all the information that you need there. With those general information, it will help you with some of the questions in the map skills, and it will also help you with some of the questions in the map interpretation. So it is very important to read them. And then after that, you need to read the questions twice before you even answer. Read the question and then you read the question again. We also emphasize that you underline the action verbs, whereby it says explain, whereby it says account, whereby it says give or state, so that you can get a clear understanding on what you should do in that question. And also, we are looking at question 3, which is your map work. You will always be given an instruction. For example, they can say refer to block B1. So when the question is giving you a block to refer to, you go to that block so that you can identify those features that you need to answer. And then after that, when it comes to the calculations, make sure that all the steps are included in your answer book, because calculations are marked per step. So you cannot do the calculation at aside and then you only write the final answer. You will then lose the mark. And then after you are done with your calculation, also check the mark allocation. It will guide you. If you are given a calculation where the marks allocation is 5 times 1, it means you need 5 things that you need to do there. And if you are given a calculation and the marks is saying 3 times 1, it means you need to do 3 things. So check the mark allocation also, it will guide you. And then after that, all the calculations, you need to use a calculator so that you're gonna get a correct answer. Do not assume or do not work out the answers in the paper. Just use a calculator. You know that each and every question paper, it will have a map work. So therefore, you prepare yourself, you bring a ruler, you bring a calculator, a pencil, a protractor, and everything that you will need in the map work. Remember, you will never know the questions up until you are inside this exam center and it is time for you to go through the question paper. And then after that, you also need not to forget to include your unit. If you are given, for example, they said calculate the area and your answer should be on a kilometer squared. Those kilometers squared are your units. So make sure that you include also the units. And then you need to double check your answers again. In double checking your answers, maybe you're doing a calculation, so do it again so that you can see, are you still getting the same answer? If you are getting the different answers, it means there is somewhere where you have done it wrong, so check again. Remember, you have 3 hours. Out of that 3 hours, you have your 3 questions. It means 1 hour per question, 1 hour per question, of which is enough time. And should it be you finished 1 question in less than an hour, again, go through and double check. Is my numbering correct? Did I answer all the questions? If you left a space, just think of something that you can include in that space. Remember, we don't emphasize for learners not to answer all the questions, because you will never know. Maybe you know something, then you are doubting. You never know if it's correct or not. So simple, answer all the questions. Do not leave any space. So now, our question 3 today is taken from the map of Verulamhr. Again, you cannot answer map work questions without having a map. So I will suggest that each and everyone must have his or her own copy of the map of Verulamhr so that you can see what we are talking about. Remember, you will be alone in the exam room, so you need to practice as early as in now. When you come to the exam room, you will be familiar on what you should do. So here you are given the map of Verulamhr, and then you are given the map of South Africa. In that map of South Africa, they also given you the location. So these are the provinces, and then they gave you the location. Where is this Verulamhr we are talking about? Before you even go through the general information, if you know the provinces, the location of the provinces in the map of South Africa, by now you're supposed to know that Verulamhr is in KwaZulu-Natal. So therefore, we're moving right along. So should it be still you are not familiar with the area, then you have your general information. Under your general information, it's going to start with your coordinates. As you can see there, 29 degrees, 35 minutes south with 31 degrees as well as your 0 minutes. Again, where do they get this? From the map that you are having. Then secondly, you need to read this general information so that you can see, as they are saying, Verulamhr is a town that is located to the north of Durban. So maybe it is your first time you even hear of that area. But by reading the general information, you will have the clear indication on what you should expect in that area. Then secondly, by studying the map also, it will tell you something about the area. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes to read the general information on your own, and then after 3 minutes, we will proceed to the next. I believe that we are all done. So remember, in your question 3, we said you will have 3 figures, which is 3.1, your 3.2, as well as your 3.3. So starting with our figure 3.1 is where we're going to get our map skills as well as the calculation. Again, you cannot select on what calculation you are going to study because you will never know which calculation will be asked. Remember, we have 6. So out of the 6, they can only ask 1 because of the mark allocation. So you cannot be specific. Your 3.1.1, Verulamhr is located to the north of Durban. Is it a village? Is it a province? Is it a town? Is it a metropolis? So therefore, if you did not read the general information and you don't know this Verulamhr, it will be difficult for you to answer this question. But because you are given an information to refer to make things easier, so I'm going to give you 1 minute to answer this question, and then after that we're gonna move to the correction, then we move to the next question. So I'm going to give you again just 2 minutes to read the general information again. Now that we have seen our first question, it's based on the general information, and then after that we will then be proceeding with the rest of the questions. Now, I believe you are all ready to answer our first question as you are given the 4 options. So again, I'm going to give you just 1 minute, and then after 1 minute, we will be able to proceed to the correction. Right, with the hope that we are all done. So looking at the tips before we display the corrections, you need to read the general information, as I have said, of the area, as the question is based on the general information. And also you need to study the map to see the location of this area, of which we have done that one. So looking at our correction, the Verulamhr is a town located to the north of Devon. So how do we know it is a town? Because we are given in the general information. Then we move to the second question. Second question, it says the coordinate of Verulamhr is 29 degrees and 35 and 35 minutes south, with your 31 degrees as well as your 0 minutes east. So now these are the coordinates that we are given. But now the question is asking about this 29 degrees. Is it a degree? Is it a longitude? Is it a latitude? Or is it a number? So again, I'm going to give you 1 minute, and then after 1 minute, we will be able to proceed to the corrections. Right, looking at the tips before we come to the corrections. The coordinates are found or are calculated using the 3 units: your degrees, your minutes, as well as your seconds. And then after that, the fourth one will be the direction. And then also the degree is a south, with a south direction. It is a latitude. So as we have seen there at the map in the corner, you are given 29 degrees, 35 minutes with an S. That S, it stands for the south direction. So now that south direction, it is referring to as a latitude. So by now you should see where is our answer. Then the degree with the east direction, it is referred to as a longitude. So you're supposed to know this by heart. Your south direction, it is referring to the latitude, and your east direction, it is referring to your longitude. And then after that, we do our correction. So because the 29 degree is at the south direction, so therefore our correct answer is C, which is your latitude. And then the third question, the contour interval of the topographic map is it 2, is it 5, is it 20, or is it 10? So again, your contour interval, even if you are not sure, you should check at the end of your map, it is written there. So if it's a topographic map, it is there. If it's an orthophoto map, it is there. So again, I'm going to give you 1 minute to answer, and then after 1 minute, we're going to proceed to the next 8 questions. Looking at the tips before we display our corrections, remember you should understand when we're talking about the contour interval, what are we talking about? We are talking about the differences between your contour lines. You will remember that in the map, we call it the contour lines, and then in a synoptic weather map, we call it isobars. So the spacing in between those lines, we call it the contour interval. Remember again, you will be given the contour interval at the bottom of the map. So even if you forgot, you can even check on the map because the answer is there. So looking at our contour interval of the topographic map, it is 20 meters, which means you can even check with the contour lines, the number that is inside. Is it the difference? Is it 20? So that you are sure. So our answer there is C again, which is 20 meters. Then we're moving to the next question. Our next question is a calculation. Remember your figure 3.1, you will get the map skills and then you'll get the map calculation. So it says calculate the average gradient. We are calculating the average gradient between the spot height 98. Remember the symbol or the sign for the spot height, it's a dot, in block C4. And the spot height 68 in block C5 on the orthophoto map. So by now, you're supposed to know the difference between the maps. This is the topographic map and this is your orthophoto map. So if the question is saying orthophoto map, it means you should be at this side. So we are looking at your block C4 as well as your block C5. You need to check the spot height. The symbol for the spot height is the dot, and then with another spot height is 16, which is another dot, and then 68 in block C5 on the orthophoto map. You are also given the formula. Average gradient is equal to vertical interval over horizontal equivalent. So this is your height, which is the difference in height, and this is your distance. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to work on this calculation, and then after 5 minutes we will proceed to the corrections. Looking there, we're going to start with our tips before we reach the corrections, because we want you to understand how did we arrive to the answer. And also, the gradient, it refers to the measure of how steep as well as how gentle the slope is or the line is. That's why we calculate the gradient. And also, it can be calculated by dividing the vertical height and also by the horizontal distance. So I've already given you that the vertical height, which is your vertical interval, is the difference in height, and also the horizontal distance, which is your horizontal equivalent. It's whereby you are looking for the distance. And then also you need to understand that the gradient, the answer, it should be left in a ratio scale. Then looking at our solution, taken from our formula, which is vertical interval. Vertical interval, we said this is the height. Your horizontal equivalent, we said this is the distance. So you start by the vertical interval as your number one. So what do? We minus the two heights so that we're gonna be left with the difference. Again, we start with the bigger one and you separate to a smaller one. Why? Because we don't want a negative number. In geography, we don't work on a negative number. So vertical interval is equal to 98. This 98, as you can see, is the spot height from a block C4 and with another spot height from block C5, which is 68. So 98 is the bigger a number. So we start with 98, then you separate with 68. Remember, we do this in a calculator. Don't just assume, because you're going to get a wrong answer. So use a calculator. 98 minus 68 will give us 30. Then 30 meters, because gradient is calculated in meters. And then secondly, we're looking at our horizontal equivalent. Horizontal equivalent, remember this is the distance. So in order for you to get the distance, you need to use your ruler, your 30 centimeter ruler. You start from the spot height 98. Remember, you don't place your ruler in the number, but you place it in the dot. And then you proceed to the next spot height 68. Again, you're not gonna put it in number 68, but you're gonna use the dot so that you get the correct measurement. And then after that, the gradient is supposed to be on the meters, which means, so by having the correct measurement, remember our rulers are not the same, so you will have that 3-inch difference. Hence, some might get 3,5, some might get 3,7. But when you are getting 3,4 as well as 3,8, you are now out of the measurement. So we're going to use 3.6 because it's in the middle. So the answer for the correct 3,6 centimeter, because we measure in centimeter, then we convert. Then after that, times 100. Where do we get this 100? It's from the scale of the orthophoto map, which is 1:10,000. Then after that, because we are using an orthophoto map, and our answer is supposed to be on a meters. So hence we are using the hundreds. Remember, if we are using a topographic map, we're going to use 500. So 3,6 times 100 will give us 360 meters. So by now you have your third mark. Then after that, once we are done calculating the vertical interval alone, as well as the horizontal equivalent alone, you then go back to the formula. The formula is saying vertical interval over horizontal equivalent, which means you take the answer of vertical interval, which is 30, over the answer of horizontal equivalent, which is 360. By writing this fraction in a correct way, you're gonna get mark. So we call it a correct substitution. It means you're not going to start by saying 360 over 30, because now you are confusing the formula, because the formula is VI for a vertical interval over horizontal equivalent. So you will have the mark for the correct substitution. And then after that, you're going to break this fraction, 30 meters over 360 meters. You then divide both sides with your vertical interval, which is 30 and then 30. After this, do not put this in as a fraction in your calculator, because you're going to get a wrong answer, your 0,0 something. But if you are doing it manually, 30 divided by 30 will give you 1. Then 360 divided by 30 will give you 12. Because in our tips we said the answer of gradient is supposed to be on a ratio scale. You then break this fraction and you have the answer of 1:12 to make it a ratio scale. So you have that 5 marks. Remember, sometimes the gradient they can simply use in 3 questions. The first question, they will ask you to give the difference in the spot height. So you do this. Then you get that 1 mark. Then the second question, they will ask you to give the distance in meters for the very same spot height that you have been calculating. And then you do this. Then you have your 3 marks. And then your third question, they will say use the answer in the first question as well as in the second question to calculate the gradient. You then use this. So in total, you're gonna have that 5 marks. Whether the questions were broken into 3 or it was just a 1 question whereby you need to calculate everything, but if they break it into 3, remember, you will be asked about the difference in height, or sometimes they can calculate a difference in height for you, but it will be indicated in the instructions that the vertical interval is. So if they have calculated for you, there is no need. You simply move to the next step. Then we're moving right along. Your question 3.1.5, it's saying account for the calculated. Remember, we said you need to underline the action word so that you understand what you should do in that question. So if the question said account, it means explain. So account for the calculated gradient in question 3.1.4. So you need to explain for that a 1 is to 12. Again, I'm going to give you 2 minutes in explaining, looking at the answer that we have 1 is to 12. So what does it tell us that 1 is to 12? That's how you're going to account. So 2 minutes. After 2 minutes, we then proceed to the corrections. Right, looking at our solution there. So when the answer of gradient is between 1 to 25, it means the slope or the area is steep. Should you have your 26 upwards, then the slope is gentle. Or if it reaches from 50 to 100 to 200, it is now very gentle. So the answer there, the average gradient calculated is 1 is to 12. You need to include the answer. And then after indicating that the slope is steep, remember between 1 to 25, your slope or your gradient is steep. And then 26 and above, then your gradient is gentle. So that's how you get that 2 marks, by indicating the calculated gradient is the answer, and then indicating is it a steep slope or is it a gentle slope. Then looking at the tips again, in figure 3.2, it's based on the interpretation. Remember, I said you're going to interpret what we have learned in the theory, and you are going to interpret what we have learned in the general information, or you interpret what you see in the map when they are saying refer to block so and so. So you can interpret also the questions. It should be based on your settlement as well as on your economic geography, so they can put any of the questions. And then after that, you also need to learn what to interpret what we have learned in the theory part when it comes to the map work. So your figure 3.2, we are saying it's the map interpretation. Remember your map interpretation, it has 12 marks. You are given refer to J in block D1. So now in D2 on the topographic map, it means we are using which side? The topographic map. And then after that, we are looking at the 2 blocks, which is your D1 as well as your D2. Then the first question, it says, is the settlement pattern, remember the settlement pattern, we have learned that in the theory part, but it also applies into the map work. Is the settlement pattern in block D2 dispersed or nucleated? So now you should think, what are the characteristics, or how do we explain the dispersed pattern and how do we explain the nucleated pattern? So for 1 mark. Then secondly, we are looking at the settlement pattern in block D2. Is it a dispersed or a nucleated? Then secondly, you need to name 2 services. Remember the types of services we learned in economic geography in your tertiary service. So now you name 2 services found in block D1. And then your third question, you give two types of primary sector activities. So now you should understand that we have 4 primary sector activities under primary. So they said give 2 that is found in block D2. So out of the 4, so there is a 2 that is not found in block D2. So therefore, the importance of referring to the map so that you can answer correctly, because as I'm saying, the primary activities, there are 4. But now the question is asking about the 2 that is included in block D2. So I'm going to give you 6 minutes to work on these 3 questions, and then after 6 minutes, we will be proceeding to the corrections. Looking there in our solution, the first question is the settlement pattern in block D2 dispersed or nucleated? So the answer there is nucleated. So how do we identify this is nucleated? You need to remember, when we're talking about the dispersed pattern, we're talking about the buildings or the houses that are far from each other. And then the nucleated, we're talking about the buildings or the houses that are close to each other. But now, when it comes to map, how do we identify? We're looking at your block D2. So you will realize that the symbol that is used for the building are those small black box. So now, those boxes are close to each other. They are indicating what? A nucleated pattern. So should it be there was a follow-up question where they said, give a reason. Why are you saying it's nucleated? You then say the buildings are close to each other. Then secondly, you name the 2 services that are found in block D1. So looking at block D1, there is an S there. S stands for school. And also we're looking at K. Remember, K is the symbol for the place of worship. In the worship, there is a service. And then again, we're looking at P. That P is your post office. Again, if you're not sure about the symbols that are being used, you always need to refer to the references so that you get the correct answer. And then we proceed to our question number 3. You give 2 types of primary sector activities found in block D2. So therefore, you refer in block D2, there is a row of trees for the forestry. And also there is a river in block D2 for the fishing. Remember, you cannot say there is farming because there is no cultivated land, even though farming is one of the primary sector's activities, but because it is not included in block D2. Also, you cannot say mining because there is no evidence of mining in block D2. Hence, we are saying forestry because there is an evidence of the row of trees, and we are saying fishing because there is a river in that block. So I hope you do realize that you need to answer based on what is given on the map. Then we are still in figure 3.2. Remember, it's 12 marks. So your question number 4, 5, and 6. Number 4, identify the street pattern marked by K. So the instruction says refer to block J in block E3 on the topographic map. So it's J in block E3 on the topographic map. And then after, identify the street pattern marked by K. So the street pattern marked by K is in block E3. So what pattern is that one? Remember the street patterns, there are 3. You have learned them in the theory part. Now you need to interpret them in the map work. Then number 5, is the type of slope gentle or steep? And then number 6, you give a reason for your answer. So again, you need to interpret based on what you see in the map. I'm going to give you 3 minutes to answer these 3 questions, which means it's 1 minute per question. Looking there at our corrections, the first question, which is question number 4, 3.2.4, you identify the street pattern that is marked by K. So we call it's an irregular pattern. You see them in the map that those streets are not the same. Some are long, some are short. Therefore, they are displaying an irregular pattern. And then number 5 is the type of slope, a gentle or steep. So we are saying it is steep. We are still in block E3. Then number 6, giving the reason why are we saying this is a steep, a slope. It because of the contour lines, they are close to each other. As you can see there in the map, they are very, very close to each other, indicating that the slope is steep. Then we're moving to figure 3.3. So with your figure 3.3, remember these are your GIS questions. Under your GIS questions, again, you should at least try to understand all the GIS concepts so that you can be able to apply them. The first question, you define the term remote sensing. Then secondly, you name the 2 benefits of remote sensing. And then thirdly, the picture marked I in block A2 as well as A3. So that picture is between your A2 as well as your A3 is classified as, is it a polygon or is it a line picture? So again, I'm going to give you 4 minutes to go through these 3 questions, and then after 4 minutes, we will be able to do the correction. We're looking there at our first answer, defining what is a remote sensing. Is the obtaining of information from a distance without being physically there. So one might ask, how am I going to obtain the information without being physically there? So by using a satellite image, you will be able to obtain that information. Then second question, it says, name 2 benefits of a remote sensing. So one of the benefits, we are talking about the improved security. Remember, we are obtaining the information using a satellite image, which is more advanced. So the improved security, and we are looking at the sharing of ideas, and also we are looking at gathering of the information. Remember, the definition is obtaining information. So one of the benefits, we will be able to gather the information in a short space of time. And also we're looking at the sharing of the equipment. So once we have improved in terms of the security or in getting the information and also in securing this information, then we proceed to the next questions. We're looking at your 3.3.3, whereby you were supposed to the feature that is marked I in block A2 as well as your block A3 is classified as, is it a polygon or is it a line picture? So we are seeing that the I, it is indicating a road. So therefore, the road is using a line. Hence, you're supposed to know what are the examples of the polygon. We're talking about your cultivated land. We're talking about your mine dump. And then When it comes to the line, the road is the line feature, the river is the line feature amongst those features. And then after that, you're gonna have your point features. Again, the buildings, as you've seen that small a block, it's indicating a point. Your spot heights, those are the points. Your row of trees, those are the points. Then your next question, which is question 3.3.4 as well as your 3.3.5. You are given a picture there. It's picture A as well as picture B. You refer to the following image. Your 3.3.4, which image has a low spatial resolution, looking at A as well as B. And then your 3.3.5, you need to give a reason for your answer. Remember, the question is asking about the image with a low spatial resolution. And then you give a reason. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes. So 1 minute to identify between the picture with the low spatial resolution, and then 2 minutes to give your reason. And then after that, we proceed to the corrections. Right? Looking there, the image with a low spatial resolution, we are looking, it is A. Why it is A? As you can see, you cannot tell what is happening in that picture. But looking at picture B, you can see these are the buildings, so it is clear. So giving a reason, we are saying because the image is blurry or the image is not clear, then you get your 2 marks just like that. And then we need to summarize on what we have learned today. We have learned about the map skills, we have learned about the map calculation, and we have looked into the map interpretation. And then after that, we have done some GIS concept. So to give you the preview of our next lesson, we're going to focus on paper 1 revision. Under question 1, you'll realize that under question 1, you're going to have your climate as well as weather questions, the one that we call your climatology. Then we have came to an end of our lesson today. Hopefully you have enjoyed the lesson, but most of all, I hope you have learned something today. Thank you and stay tuned for the next one.